am building more than just rank and file soldiers. I am building something that will tear through the mightiest steel and knock their fortresses into dust. I have created the devil himself.
Do you want to know a secret? I don't like World War II zombies. Yep, that's right. The guy who loves IW more than most COD zombie modes, the guy who defends Black Ops 4, the guy who even has a soft spot for exo zombies, can't bring himself to like World War II zombies. That guy being me. But believe me when I say I tried. I really wanted to love this mode. I still want to love it. But gameplay-wise, this game is a mess of dull maps, poor gameplay in terms of innovations in enemy types, and outright tedious and poorly designed Easter eggs. But there is one thing about this mode that makes it not a total waste, that being the story. Despite the gameplay being garbage, the general story and atmosphere of World War II Zombies is amongst the best in any COD zombie story. And since I don't have the maps anymore, I might as well do a retrospective from the creepiest COD zombie story in time for the creepiest holiday of the year. With that said, let's take a look at the story of World War II zombies that all starts with the final Reich. This will easily be the longest segment in the retrospective since the Final Reich understandably has the most background information since it has to set up the plot and the characters within it. The story starts out with Radu, our team's operator, attempting to set them up with a new operation to find and rescue Klaus Fischer, the brother of one of the newly formed team's members, Marie. I guess I'll get into the characters. As far as our main characters go, they could definitely use some improvement. In Call of Duty Zombies, each group of characters are always diverse and unique from one another, even in crews that don't take themselves seriously like Victus or IW's cast. This way, each character stands out and adds more variety to the crew, which allows them, in Ultimus and Primus' case, to work off of each other. However, World War II's cast of characters, aside from Jostin, the characters all have the same dull energy. Sure, they may be from different backgrounds, but they're all kinda boring. Jostin is fun because of his energetic and comedically strong Scottish accent, and it's a nice break from the rest of the blank-faced crew. And Marie is interesting due to her heavy involvement with certain areas of the plot, but I cannot for the life of me tell you what's there to like about Olivia and Jefferson. So yeah, the main crew have really dull personalities, but on the bright side, there are some cool characters. Like for instance, the man who has Klaus captured, Dr. Peter Straub, who manages to be one of the best villains in Call of Duty Zombies history. Imagine an intimidating, unsettling Richthofen, and that's who this guy is. I'll go more in depth with him in a bit. Anyways, back to the story. Klaus, Marie's brother, leaked her information about some of the sinister experiments Straub has been up to, and it's revealed the key to whatever Straub is seeking lies within artwork of all things. So Radu and Marie gathered special operatives most noticeable for their operations involving art, and they're tasked with finding and rescuing Klaus. However, these guys aren't exactly a search and rescue party, and Jostin is the first to point this out and he's ready to bail. Time to talk about atmosphere. World War II wanted to stray away from the goofy side of zombies as much as possible and decided to go full horror, which is a decision I greatly admire. I think they did a great job in this front. The music has a slow, sinister tone, the models for the zombies and sub-bosses are grotesque and brutal, and the maps have a mature, gritty, realistic feel to them. This is the only time a Call of Duty Zombies game approached full-on horror, and they did a fantastic job. Back to the story, it's time I went more in depth with the background for this story. Klaus and Marie grew up together, and Klaus always wanted to have a great impact on life and wanted to bring glory to his country. Once the Nazi Party was established, Klaus thought highly of their concepts and goals while Marie predicted their true intentions, and joined a secret British service. Meanwhile, Klaus was left to take care of his father until his passing, and Klaus went out to aid the Nazis in the science department. He soon discovers a statue that Hitler himself has developed a great interest in, the statue of King Barbarossa. And once he notifies the Nazis of his discovery, an expedition led by Peter Straub is sent to the peaceful town of Middelburg. They discover a hilt to a sword of some kind, and they try everything in their power to remove the hilt, until one day an accident happens, leaving 2 soldiers dead. However, Dr. Straub is amazed once the soldiers rise up as undead monsters, and are quickly shot down by other soldiers. Straub is fascinated by this event, and he later discovers it was an energy called Geistkraft that resurrected the 2 soldiers, and it came directly from the statue. Straub sees this as an opportunity, and he starts experimenting with Geistkraft so he can weaponize it and create an undead army. However, the Geistkraft energy takes a toll on Straub's mental state, and we see him progress from a devious, fascinated scientist to a power-hungry madman.
Little did we know that we were about to uncover something that would change our understanding of the world. I had seen something astonishing. I had seen death overcome, and I had seen a vision of our Führer's future. I have found that by triggering the pain receptors on these corpses, I can augment the soldier's strength and speed. As someone who has extensively studied the effects of pain, it was inspirational. I have found my purpose here. I am to bring pain to the world. I am building more than just rank and file soldiers. I am building something that will tear through the mightiest steel and knock their fortresses into dust. I have created the devil himself.
This is such a cool transformation, and seeing Straub's descent into madness is actually somewhat disturbing. Klaus thinks so too, and he leaks all this information to Marie, hoping she can somehow stop the very people he once mistook as heroes. Straub learns of Klaus's betrayal and he decides to punish him, but right after he does so, his experiments get loose and he's forced to flee Middelburg. Back to our group of characters, they arrive in the quiet town and they fight off Straub's experiments. The characters also solve a bunch of puzzles as they're attacked by Victor, a hot-headed guy who was a part of Straub's expedition. In between all of the chaos, we find out apparently Straub isn't the first to become obsessed with Geistkraft technology. This all goes back to King Barbarossa. Barbarossa stole an ancient sword and became corrupt with the power of Geistkraft. This caused his team of Raven Lords to turn on him, similar to the unfortunate tale of Caesar, and they disassembled the sword to keep something much darker at bay. How kind of them to set these characters up with a nice little fetch quest. Anyways, they fight Victor off, and the good news is they find Klaus. The bad news?
Klaus, what have they done to you?
Yep, as punishment for betraying him, Straub placed Klaus inside of a PANZERMORDER, his most horrifying creation yet. The characters fight off the beast and is carried up to Victor's blimp. The creature destroys the blimp, but it destroys itself in the process, and Marie watches as her brother perishes. But Klaus is not dead. He somehow survived the explosion. Our characters have also now retrieved the hilt of the sword, but once Klaus comes to, he seems out of his mind and confused. He then kills himself, leaving our characters one cryptic message: the Emperor must not return. And that's where the story of the Final Reich ends, and it does a great job of setting up the season. Its atmosphere is amazing, Straub is a wonderfully creepy villain, and it's a nice foundation for the DLCs to expand on. While the characters need work, the Final Reich is enriched with great setup.
Over here.
The Darkest Shore. Now, as far as story info goes, The Darkest Shore doesn't really give too much noticeable info that adds to the overall narrative, but it does play around with some neat ideas. I guess I should start with the intro. It starts us off with our characters reluctantly paddling to a remote island where Straub is apparently hiding. It's clear our characters really don't want to be back in the field after the disaster in Middleburg, and they're understandably shaken up after their last mission. Plus, there's still hostility in the group, specifically between Olivia and Marie, since Olivia doesn't buy Marie's intentions are solely for the good of the mission. The petty banter is ended once our characters see their backup was killed in a cool, ambiguous way and are quickly surrounded by the undead. Further into the map, it turns out the rumor of Straub's whereabouts turned out to be true, and he taunts our characters over the microphone, calling them mean names, and also explaining that after the events of the Final Reich, he torched the place to the ground. Not only that, but he also discovered the body of Victor, the hot-headed blimp-owning madman, a part of his previous expedition. The two didn't get along well, so Straub took his head and wears it around on a spike as a trophy. Did I mention that Straub is an amazing villain? However, it's time to get into the highlight of the map that truly makes it stand out story-wise, and that's the Muture. This sub-boss is one of the most interesting, underexplored creatures put in Call of Duty Zombies. Since we find out this island was the first place Straub experimented with zombies on, it's no surprise we find out he experimented a lot. And one of those experiments was the rational but generic attempt to give zombies a form of intelligence. This was an idea seen in Kino to Toten, but it's never been a full-fledged executed idea until now, and it's one that's really interesting. See, Straub was half right. The Mutures still maintained irrational violent behavior that makes zombies, well, zombies, but they also have developed emotions. We find out that these monsters have actually developed anger, hope, and even fear, unknown to Straub, who renders them as a failed experiment. These guys not only helped each other escape, but they've also developed a religion vowing to worship a statue of goddess known to bring joy through sacrifice. These things are so interesting, not only story-wise, but also somewhat gameplay-wise, since they actually are much more tactical and clever than typical zombies and sub-bosses. There's something about a violent monster that can feel a human emotion like fear that really intrigues me, and is a great addition to the map story-wise. Back to the main story, our characters dread each of Straub's attacks to kill them, and our characters tell their superiors to bomb this place no matter what, with Straub's horrible experiments convincing them to put the greater good above their own lives. Character development. They fight off a bunch of horribly mutated Mutures and they attempt an escape. And with that, our characters have now grown from reluctant soldiers carrying out a mission to heroes willing to put a stop to Straub themselves. Like I said, story-wise, not too many new concepts are set up, but the character's progression, the increasing insanity of Peter Straub, and the idea of the Mutures make this map really stand out as something special in the story category. However, things don't get really interesting until the Shadow Throne. The Shadow Throne is the most polarizing map out of the bunch. Not because it's bad, because unlike its fellow brethren, it is certainly not. This map is great. It even made my top 5 current gen zombies maps list that I now have to subtract since I've played Dead of the Night. But the problem is this map is too good. Its storyline, atmosphere, and setting elevates this map to a level that puts it in, dare I say it, kinda Black Ops 3 category, if not at least Black Ops 4. Story-wise, this map is the pinnacle of the World War II zombie story, and honestly feels like the climactic conclusion. While it's obviously not, it is certainly the conclusion of this game's streak of great story info. But enough about what my opinion of the map is. Let's go more in depth with the story of the Shadow Throne. The map begins with our characters seeing the Nazis' last-ditch effort attack on Berlin. Much like WW2, this map is set in a fictional iteration of a real invasion in World War II that is cleverly implemented into the overall plot without feeling forced. However, the difference between the two maps, other than the fact that one has dragons, is GOROT takes place long after Stalingrad has been ravaged by dragons, robots, and the undead. The invasion of Berlin is happening now. That means this map has things around the area that perfectly blends the chaos of warfare with the pure horror of zombies, making the map stand out in its own unique way. Around the map, you come across injured soldiers, recently evacuated homes and establishments, and of course war-torn streets. While GOROT still excels more of its atmosphere due to the fact it's admirably and absolutely insane map, I still think the Shadow Throne handles its chaotic nature appropriately, considering the more grounded tone World War II Zombies hopes to achieve. Anyways, we actually get some character development between Marie and Olivia since they are now trusted allies and have put their bickering behind. While it's a little too sudden and it isn't built up to at all, it's still nice to see some development between our characters. They hitch a ride on a pod of a blimp that falls into the chaotic city of Berlin. Shortly after, Straub notices our heroes are still, well, alive, and he sends everything he can to kill them. The characters retrieve the blade of the sword and make their way to the blimp. They reroute the energy of the blimp, causing the zombies in Straub's room to awaken. But since Straub is not only the main villain of the series, but is also one of the biggest highlights of it, there's no way Sledgehammer would have the balls to kill him off.
This isn't possible! This is not possible!
Straub is defenseless.
Stay away! Do you hear me? I created you! No! No! No!
Oh, well, never mind. In all seriousness, this was such a ballsy yet awesome decision. Everyone thought the rest of the season would comprise of the characters trying to build the story before Straub does, ending with a final battle with him, but unlike Black Ops 3 or Infinite Warfare, World War II turns the Collectathon formula on its head by killing off the main antagonist in DLC 2. In execution-wise, the death scene is shocking, gruesome, and what better way for Straub to die than for him to be torn apart by his own creations. While I do miss Straub since he was a great villain, this death scene was the twist the story needed to keep fans of the story invested. The crew run to the last creation of Straub's, but they defeat him and make a stand in the city when they receive some company.
I'm out too. Here.
However, Redoux makes a last-minute rescue and our characters make it out of the overrun city. It should be no mystery as to why this map's story is pretty awesome. Having Straub attack an entire city with his creations is climactic. The map ties into real-life history really well. There's really subtle hints at a darker force in play since our characters finding the blade is just a little too coincidental. The map's dark yet chaotic atmosphere is balanced really well, and this map sets the story up for many new possibilities. So, does the story get better from here? Well...
We're not alone here.
This place is coming down.
Let's do this. No more time. We leave or we shall be crushed.
I've had a lot of maps take my spot for my least favorite map in the past. First was Transit, then it was Die Rise, then Shadows of Evil, which is now one of my favorites, then Origins, which I've warmed up to. So what hosts the title now? Well, most of you might assume WW2 since I make it no secret in any of my Zombies videos that I despise that map. However, it's actually the Tortured Path. I won't comment too much on this map gameplay-wise, but what I will say is it's absolutely awful in every way imaginable. Well, except for the story, which isn't really too hot either. After the events of the Shadow Throne, the Nazis are starting to lose control of their zombies, unsurprisingly, and they are now running rampant through Europe. This forms the Bureau of Archaic Technology, a group that strategically combats the undead hordes. And in desperation to prevent the Germans from winning the war, the Bureau decides to forge the sword. They use the Nazis' research to locate Duel, an underground place where forging the sword is possible. Now, I must admit, I was kinda disappointed that the story turned its focus to an actual full-scale apocalypse as opposed to secret missions and cover-ups like in the Final Reich and the Darkest Shore, but after the events of the Shadow Throne, keeping the zombie forces a secret would be impossible. Plus, this is the only logical way to go in the story. but I would be lying to myself if I said it was interesting. It's not boring, but without the amount of details, mysteries, and isolated horrific atmospheres the previous maps introduced, the story gets kinda stale. It would be one thing if the characters were engaging enough to keep me interested, but by this point they've barely had any major development and they are still dull. Even Jostyn has gotten kinda boring. Anyways, the Bureau sends some officers to escort the sword pieces via caravan since the skies are heavily patrolled by German forces. After they have a slight hiccup with the caravan crashing, they run into some undead trouble, but they make it to a nearby docking port, where their transport is awaiting them. They hop in a ship that's quickly attacked by the undead, and the agents on board have to fight them off. They make it to Antarctica where our OG characters are waiting. Once they receive the sword parts, they venture further into the cave where Marie starts seeing none other than her own brother, Klaus, hiding in the shadows. It's clear the cave is having an effect on our characters, so they hurry up and are able to forge King Barbarossa's sword at last. The cave begins to cave in, and Marie is being manipulated into staying by unknown dark forces, but our characters don't leave her behind and they all escape. And the outro cutscene is literally Jostyn and Jefferson having a non-important exchange. Literally nothing of importance is revealed. While the same can be said about the Shadow Jones outro cutscene, at least it looked cool. This is currently my least favorite outro cutscene in all of Zombies, by the way. So yeah, that was really all the story info inside the Tortured Path, and like I said, it's a little disappointing. Gone are the horror and mysteries the last three maps had, and now the story focuses more on the war aspect of the story, which would be a neat transition if any of it was clever or risky. But the Tortured Path offers no big reveals or revelations, and only has a few pointless hints that there are darker forces at play, which we've known since the very first map. And plus, assembling Barbarossa's sword was largely anticlimactic. Overall, the Tortured Path is just uninteresting with few neat ideas sprinkled throughout.
Bloody hell.
Now it's time for the final map in all of Zombies, well, World War II Zombies, the Frozen Dawn. The map starts off with Ledoux and Vivian, a minor unlockable character, watching as Straub's undead army destroys everything in their path. Vivian informs Ledoux that the blimp our characters took after the last map has crashed and the sword has yet again gone missing. Instead of focusing on the chaos around him, Ledoux has all of his attention on the sword, making Vivian believe that the sword has now driven him to an unhealthy obsession similar to Straub. He responds with,
"That sword is the key to all this."
"Yep, I'd have to agree with you there, Vivian." Back to our characters, they awaken near an ancient cave full of Geistcraft energy, and our heroes have fought too hard to turn back now. They enter the cave and fight through its many dangers and uncover many revelations. Know how King Barbarossa stole an ancient sword? Yeah, well it kinda belonged to somebody. An ancient unstoppable force of nature. His name is the God King. Very original name, I'm not gonna lie. And apparently all these events were all part of a cycle this entire time. You see, every few decades there would be a power-hungry madman attempting to harness Geistcraft energy. 4 heroes willing to stop him known as the Raven Lords, a helping hand that ensures the Raven Lord's success known as the Rook, and the brief resurrection of the God King following his temporary defeat. And one of our characters are aware of this cycle, Vivian, who's being manipulated by the God King to resurrect him. If you read her notes, you see how she is slowly convinced by the God King that breaking the cycle is the only way, and it's pretty cool to see such a minor character given an important task in the overall narrative. As sarcastic as that sounds, I swear I'm being genuine. And just as the cycle predicts, Vivian plunges the forged sword into the God King. I'm sure she's fine. By the way, there's a really cool detail of the God King. Apparently King Barbarossa and Straub's head are on the belt of the God King, and can I just mention that Straub's head being turned into an accessory similar to how he treated Victor? It's just hilarious irony. Then after a grueling battle of the God King, Klaus reveals himself as the Rook of the team, and he sends Geistcraft energy into our team to allow them to defeat the God King for now, sending him into yet another slumber until another cycle starts. And we figure out some last bit of information. It turns out Ledoux hadn't gone insane. He's been part of a secret order known as the Order of the Ravens, who have been around for decades ensuring the completion of the cycle. This is actually a really cool revelation and makes Ledoux into a pretty interesting character. And with that, the story of World War II Zombies comes to an end. I also think the fact that the story left off with the world still being ravaged by zombies and the unsure fate of our characters made this ending a cliffhanger, similar to the unsatisfying endings of Exo Zombies, Infinite Warfare Zombies, and the Chaos story. However, you really can't accept this as an ending, since it is safe to assume the cycle will just continue and the world will be able to stop the undead threats given time. But it also cleverly leaves itself open to a sequel, which will now never happen since Sledgehammer isn't making Call of Duty games anymore. But yeah, that was the Frozen Dawn story info. And it is definitely not a bad conclusion. The revelation of the Cycle, God King, and even the Order of the Ravens help clear up many things and adds a huge number of depth and possibilities. The portrayal of Vivian was a pretty cool twist that helps highlight the power of the God King's manipulation. I can't get over that name. And the story ends with enough closure for the story to leave off on, but enough unanswered information to help make the sequel way more interesting. That sadly will never happen. I think the Frozen Dawn is a really good conclusion to the story. In conclusion, World War II Zombies has a story that has the misfortune of being attached to the worst COD Zombies game gameplay-wise. Where do I start? The gritty and semi-realistic nature of the story is brilliant, and the earlier maps have a great horror atmosphere. The amount of mysteries and revelations throughout the story really do a great job at keeping things engaging, and the overall narrative is fleshed out and executed really well. Plus, this mode perfectly blends realistic events into the main story, which in a weird way gives it a strange sense of clarity. And it's really fun for all those history geeks out there, and even for someone like me who just simply finds history fascinating. But unfortunately, there are a few hiccups. First off, the characters. Yeah, they're not memorable in the slightest and don't have a shred of personality, complexity, basically anything that makes a character a character. But admittedly, characters like Ledoux, Vivian, and especially Straub were kind of interesting, and while the story loses its edge after the Shadow Throne, it still ends off nicely. World War II Zombies, at least story-wise, still holds up in my opinion, and I'm giving it a 4 out of 5. Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed this story retrospective of World War II Zombies. If you have, then please like and subscribe, and as always, I will see you guys next time. Peace, everyone.